I remember standing outside Maison Bordeaux on a Tuesday morning in late spring, smoothing down my blouse for the third time, rehearsing answers to questions I hadn't even been asked yet. The building looked like something transplanted from Paris. Tall windows with cream-colored frames, a burgundy awning that caught the morning light just right, and that elegant cursive sign that practically whispered exclusivity. I'd walked past this place 100 times on my way to work, always glancing at the menu posted outside, always imagining what it would be like to cook there. And now, finally, I had an interview. After 15 years of washing dishes, chopping vegetables in cramped kitchens, working double shifts in places where no one bothered to learn my name, I was going to walk through those doors and show them what I could do. I checked my reflection in a parked car window one more time. Hair pulled back neatly, minimal makeup. My best interview outfit, nothing flashy, nothing that would make me stand out too much. Except I already stood out, and I knew it the moment I walked inside. The hostess at the front desk looked up with a smile that froze halfway. Her eyes did a quick scan from my face to my shoes and back again, like she was solving a puzzle she didn't want to solve. She recovered quickly, professionally. "You must be here for the interview. This way." She led me through the dining room, still empty at this hour, tables set with precision, silverware gleaming under soft lighting. Everything about the place screamed control. I could smell fresh bread baking somewhere in the back and felt a flicker of hope. This was a real kitchen, a place where food mattered. The manager was waiting in a small office near the back. His name was Philip, mid-50s, graying at the temples, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He shook my hand with the kind of grip that felt rehearsed, gestured for me to sit, and spent the first 2 minutes looking at my resume without actually reading it. "So," he said finally, eyes still on the paper, "you've worked in kitchens for quite some time." I nodded. 15 years. Started as a dishwasher, worked my way up, learned from everyone I could. He made a sound that could have been approval or dismissal. "Hard to tell. Where did you train?" "I didn't go to culinary school," I admitted, "but I've studied on my own. I've worked under several chefs, learned classical techniques, experimented with." He cut me off, self-taught then. His tone made it sound like a disease. I kept my voice steady. "Yes, but I've put in the hours. I know flavor profiles, temperature control, plating. I brought samples if you'd like to." He glanced at his watch. "The thing is, we're looking for someone with a very specific skill set, someone who fits our brand." I felt the air shift. There was something under his words, something he wasn't saying. "I've worked in fine dining before," I said. "I understand the standards." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. That slight tightening around his eyes, that tiny pause before he spoke again. "I'm sure you're very capable," he said slowly, "but our clientele expects a certain refinement, a certain image." I blinked. "Image? Yes." He folded his hands on the desk. "We need someone who our guests can connect with. Someone who represents what Maison Bordeaux stands for," and I could finish the sentence for him. "Someone who doesn't look like me, someone who doesn't have an accent, someone who isn't too Mexican." The silence between us was thick. I wanted to argue, to demand he at least taste the food I'd prepared, to prove that my hands could create something just as refined as any French-trained chef. But I'd been in this country long enough to recognize a closed door when I saw one. He stood. "I appreciate you coming in. We'll be in touch." That phrase, the universal language of rejection. I thanked him, because that's what you do when you've learned to swallow your pride for survival. I walked back through that perfect dining room, past the hostess who didn't meet my eyes, and out into the bright, unforgiving daylight. The street was busy, people rushing to work, cars honking, the city indifferent to the small devastation happening inside my chest. I stood there on the sidewalk, clutching my folder of recipes and references, and felt something crack, not break, crack, because breaking implies you can't be put back together. The walk home took longer than usual. I didn't want to go back to my apartment yet, didn't want to face my daughter's hopeful questions or my own reflection. So I walked. I passed other restaurants, cafes, food trucks. I watched people eating, laughing, living their lives without the weight I carried. Somewhere around block 3, the hurt started shifting into something else. Anger, maybe, or clarity. By the time I reached my neighborhood, the sun was higher, hotter. The streets here were different from downtown, narrower, louder, more alive. Tiendas with hand-painted signs, families sitting on stoops, the smell of carne asada drifting from someone's window. This was my world. These were my people. And suddenly, standing in front of a small storefront with a for rent sign taped to the window, I had a thought so audacious it almost made me laugh. If they wouldn't let me in their kitchen, I'd build my own, right here, in my community, and I'd make it so good that they'd have no choice but to notice. I came to this country when I was 20 years old with a backpack, $200, and a dream so big it scared me. My mother cried at the bus station in Guadalajara. My father handed me a small notebook filled with family recipes written in his careful handwriting. He kissed my forehead and said, "Whatever you cook, cook it with heart. People will taste the difference." I believed him then. I believe him now. The journey north was long, uncomfortable, and lonely. I crossed the border legally, through all the proper channels, but even legal immigration feels like you're asking permission to exist. I arrived in Los Angeles first, stayed with a distant cousin who barely remembered me, and started looking for work immediately. No one cared that I'd grown up helping my grandmother make tamales from scratch, or that I could dice an onion faster than most people could peel one. All anyone saw was a young woman with broken English and no formal experience. My first job was washing dishes at a diner in Koreatown. The owner, Mr. Kim, was kind but firm. You show up on time, you work hard, you don't complain. I did all three. I worked the evening shift, came home smelling like grease and dish soap, and studied English with library books until my eyes burned. After 6 months, Mr. Kim let me help with prep work. After a year, I was making simple dishes during the lunch rush. He never said I was good, but he didn't need to. The regulars started asking for my chilaquiles. That was the first time I realized food could be a bridge. It didn't matter that my English was still rough or that I didn't understand half the cultural references people made. When they tasted my cooking, something shifted. They saw me differently. Or maybe they finally saw me at all. Over the years, I moved from kitchen to kitchen, always chasing something better. I worked in a Thai restaurant where the chef taught me about balance, sweet and sour and salty all in one bite. I worked in an Italian place where I learned that pasta isn't just food, it's an art form. I worked in a steakhouse where precision and timing were everything. Each place added something to my skill set, but none of them felt like home. I was always the assistant, the backup, the one they called when someone was sick, never the chef, never the one whose name appeared on the menu. I got married when I was 25 to a man I met at a community center. He was kind, hardworking, and we were happy for a while. We had Sophia 2 years later, and for a brief moment, everything felt possible. But marriages are hard, especially when you're both working brutal hours just to stay afloat. We grew apart slowly, then quickly. By the time Sophia was 3, he was gone. No drama, no huge fight, just two people who realized they wanted different things. So it was just Sophia and me. I worked during the day, picked her up from daycare in the evening, and worked again after she went to bed, taking freelance catering gigs to make extra money. She grew up in kitchens, doing homework at prep tables, falling asleep to the sound of sizzling pans. She never complained, not once. She'd look up at me with those serious brown eyes and say, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to cook like you." That became my why. Every rejection, every condescending comment, every time someone mispronounced my name or assumed I couldn't understand them, I thought about Sophia. I thought about what kind of world I wanted her to grow up in. One where people like us were seen as less than, or one where we took up space unapologetically. When I saw the job posting for Maison Bordeaux, something in me shifted. The ad said they were looking for a sous chef with extensive experience, someone creative, someone who could bring new energy to their menu. I read it 3 times. I fit every qualification. I had the experience. I had the creativity. And I was tired, so tired of being invisible. So I applied. I spent a week perfecting my application. I wrote a cover letter that outlined my experience, my philosophy on food, my vision for what a modern kitchen could be. I attached photos of dishes I'd created, beautiful plating, complex flavors, things that proved I wasn't just competent, I was excellent. I sent it off and waited. When they called me for an interview, I actually screamed. Sophia came running into the room, terrified, until I grabbed her and spun her around. Mommy got an interview, a real one, at a fancy restaurant. She squealed and hugged me tight. "You're going to get it," she said, with the confidence only an 8-year-old can have. "I'm going to tell everyone my mom is a famous chef." I prepared for that interview like it was a final exam. I researched the restaurant's history, studied their menu, even visited as a customer once, spending money I didn't really have just to understand the atmosphere. I tasted their signature dishes and noted what worked and what didn't. I came up with 3 ideas for menu items that would fit their brand while adding something unexpected. I was ready, more than ready. But none of that mattered, because the moment Philip looked at me across that desk, I could see it. The decision had already been made, not based on my skills or my experience or my passion, based on the color of my skin, the way I spoke, the fact that I didn't fit into his narrow idea of what a chef should look like. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. How close I came to letting it destroy me. How easy it would have been to accept that maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't belong in that world. Maybe I should just be grateful for whatever scraps I could get. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. You develop something stronger than confidence. You develop spite, the good kind, the kind that makes you say, "Watch me." That night, I came home and didn't tell Sophia what happened right away. I made dinner, listened to her talk about school, helped her with her math homework. After she went to bed, I sat at our tiny kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. Not a list of other restaurants to apply to, a business plan. If no one would hire me, I'd hire myself. The idea felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. I had some savings, not much, maybe enough for 2 months of rent if I was lucky. I had no investors, no business experience, no safety net. What I had was 15 years of kitchen experience, a community of people who'd been overlooked just like me, and a bone-deep certainty that I could do this. I started small, research. What would it take to open a restaurant? Permits, licenses, health inspections, insurance, suppliers, equipment, staff. The list was overwhelming. Every item felt like a mountain, but I'd climbed mountains before. I reached out to people I knew, other immigrants who'd started businesses. A man named Roberto, who ran a small grocery store, sat with me for 2 hours explaining licensing requirements and introducing me to his accountant. The accountant Lorenzo was semi-retired but agreed to help me with the paperwork at a reduced rate. "You remind me of my daughter," he said. Stubborn in the best way. My cousin Marisol, who worked in real estate, helped me find the space. It was on the same street as Maison Bordeaux, just 3 blocks down. Smaller, rougher around the edges, but it had good bones, high ceilings, big windows, a kitchen space that could work if we gutted it and started over. The rent was barely affordable, but the landlord, an older white man named George, seemed charmed by my pitch. He'd never rented to someone like me before, I could tell, but something about my desperation must have been convincing. He gave me the first month at a discount. Now, I just needed to build a restaurant from nothing. If you've never tried to start a business with no money, let me tell you, it's an exercise in creativity and humiliation. I applied for small business loans and got rejected by every bank. Too risky, they said. No collateral, no established credit. I tried crowdfunding, but my social media following was basically my cousin and 3 former co-workers. I was starting to panic when my Uncle Thomas called. "I heard what you're doing," he said. His voice was gruff, but there was pride underneath. "I'm in construction. I can help with the renovation. Weekends, evenings, whenever I'm free." I almost cried. "I can't pay you much. I don't want your money," he said. "I want my niece to succeed." After that, more people started showing up. Marisol brought fabric samples for curtains she could sew. Roberto offered to connect me with food suppliers who'd give me better rates. A woman from church who used to be a teacher offered to help design the menu layout. Sophia's daycare provider, a kind older woman named Gloria, offered to watch Sophia extra hours so I could work. It was like the universe finally said, "Okay, we see you trying. Here's some help." The renovation took 3 months and felt like 3 years. We worked every evening after I finished my day job, every weekend, every spare moment. Tomás taught me how to tile. Marisol and I painted the walls a warm terracotta that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen. We installed open shelving made from reclaimed wood. The kitchen equipment was a mix of used and borrowed. Nothing fancy, but functional. I scrubbed every surface until it gleamed. The inspection process was brutal. The health inspector, a thin man with a clipboard and a permanent scowl, found violations I didn't even know existed. The hand-washing sink was 2 inches too far from the prep area. The floor grout wasn't sealed properly. I fixed everything, came back for re-inspection, and he found something else. I started to suspect he was being harder on me than necessary, but I couldn't prove it. I just kept fixing things until he ran out of complaints. While I worked on the physical space, I obsessed over the menu. This was my chance to show what I could really do. I wanted to honor my roots, the flavors I grew up with, but elevate them. Show people that Mexican food wasn't just tacos and burritos, though those could be art forms too. I developed a mold that took 3 days to make, layering over 20 ingredients until the flavor was so complex it made people cry. I created a ceviche with local fish, blood orange, and jalapeno that was both refreshing and surprising. I made tamales with unexpected fillings, like duck confit with cherry mole or roasted butternut squash with sage. For dessert, I designed a churro that was served with 3 dipping sauces: traditional chocolate, cajita, and a bourbon vanilla cream. Every dish told a story. Every plate was a statement. This is who I am, this is what I can do, and if you underestimate this, you're the one who loses. Naming the restaurant was harder than I expected. I wanted something that felt authentic but not cliché, something that honored my heritage without making it a costume. I sat with Sofia one night, brainstorming. "What about Abuela's house?" she suggested. I smiled. "That's sweet, but it sounds like a retirement home." We laughed. Then she said, "What about races, roots?" I stopped, looked at her. "Say that again, races. It means roots, right? You always talk about your roots. And food has roots too. Where it comes from." I pulled her into a hug. "You're a genius, that's it. Races." That night, I ordered a sign. Simple, elegant. Reese's in brushed gold letters. When it arrived and we mounted it above the door, I stood on the sidewalk and stared at it for 10 minutes. This was real. This was happening. I was terrified. Opening day was set for a Friday in late August. I barely slept the week before. There were 1,000 last-minute details. Training the small staff I'd hired, 3 people, all from the community, all hungry to prove themselves. Finalizing the playlist, I wanted music that felt welcoming, a mix of boleros, jazz, and modern Latin artists. Printing menus, stocking the bar, testing and retesting every dish. The morning of, I woke up at 4 a.m. with my heart racing. I got to the restaurant while it was still dark outside and just stood in the dining room, taking it in. The tables we'd restored by hand, the art on the walls, local artists I'd commissioned, the open kitchen where guests could watch us cook. It was beautiful. It was mine. Sofia showed up around noon with Marisol. She was wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, looking so grown up it hurt. "I'm so proud of you, Mommy." I knelt down to her level. "I'm doing this for you," I said, "so you grow up knowing you can do anything." She hugged me tight and I let myself feel it, all of it, the fear, the hope, the possibility. That evening, we opened the doors at 6. I'd invited friends, family, people from the neighborhood. I wasn't expecting a crowd, but I hoped for a decent turnout. By 6:15, every table was full. By 7, there was a line outside. People kept coming. They came for the food, but they stayed for the feeling. The energy in that room was electric. Laughter, conversation, the clinking of glasses. I moved through the kitchen in a trance, calling out orders, plating dishes, checking every detail. My staff was nervous but solid. We hit a rhythm. Around 8, I stepped out of the kitchen to check on the dining room. That's when I saw him, Philip, the manager from Maison Bordeaux. He was standing outside looking through the window. Our eyes met for a brief second. I didn't smile, didn't wave, just held his gaze until he looked away and kept walking. I went back to the kitchen and cooked harder. That first night, we served over 60 people. The reviews started coming in almost immediately. Someone posted on Instagram. A food blogger wrote a glowing paragraph. By Sunday, we had reservations for the next 2 weeks. I couldn't believe it, couldn't process it. I just kept cooking. Want to know what keeps you going when you've barely slept in 72 hours and your feet feel like they're going to fall off? It's watching people take their first bite of something you made and seeing their face change. That moment when flavor hits and they pause, fork halfway to their mouth, eyes widening slightly like they've just discovered something they didn't know they needed. I saw that face 100 times in those first few weeks. Races wasn't just busy, it was alive. Word spread fast, the way it does when something feels genuine. A local food blogger came in during week 2 and posted a review that went viral. She described the mole as liquid poetry and called the ceviche a revelation. She ended the post with, "This is the restaurant we didn't know we were waiting for." Her followers showed up in waves. Suddenly, we had lines down the block. Reservations filled up 2 weeks out. I had to turn people away, which felt surreal and devastating at the same time. I wanted to feed everyone. The success was exhilarating and exhausting. I was working 16-hour days, sometimes more. Prepping in the morning, cooking through lunch and dinner service, cleaning and planning after close. My staff was incredible, but there were only 4 of us and the demand kept growing. I started getting calls from journalists wanting interviews. Local TV stations asked if they could film segments. A magazine wanted to feature races in their Best New Restaurants issue. Every time my phone rang with another opportunity, I felt this strange mix of pride and imposter syndrome. I kept waiting for someone to say, "Actually, we made a mistake. You're not supposed to be here." But that call never came. One afternoon, about a month after we opened, a woman walked in without a reservation. She was older, stylish, carrying herself with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of knowing exactly who you are. She asked if I was the chef. When I nodded, she introduced herself. Catherine Moreau, food critic for the Tribune. My heart stopped. The Tribune was the paper. A good review from Catherine could make a restaurant. A bad one could kill it. She wanted to know if she could come back that evening for a full tasting. Anonymously, of course, but she wanted to give me a heads up as a courtesy. I appreciated that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled. "I've heard remarkable things. I want to see if they're true." That night, I cooked like my life depended on it, because in some ways, it did. I didn't know which table she was at. She'd made the reservation under a fake name, so I treated every dish like it was going to her. I tasted everything twice, adjusted seasoning, checked plating. My staff could feel the intensity and rose to match it. 3 days later, the review came out. I was opening the restaurant, getting ready for lunch service, when Marisol called, screaming, "Have you seen it? Have you read it?" I hadn't. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. The review was above the fold. A full column with a gorgeous photo of my duck tamale. The headline read, "Races, where tradition meets innovation and both win." I started reading. Catherine's words were elegant, precise, and devastating in the best way. She wrote about the mole. "A dish so layered and complex it demands your full attention, rewards it, and leaves you wanting more." She described the atmosphere as warm without being casual, refined without being stuffy. And then the part that made me sit down on the floor of my own restaurant and cry. In a city saturated with restaurants trying too hard to be something they're not, Races is a revelation. Chef, she used my name, cooks with the kind of confidence and skill that can't be taught, only earned. This is food with a soul, and we are all better for it. 5 stars. She gave us 5 stars. I read it 3 more times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then I called Sophia. "Baby, I did it. I really did it." She was at school, so I left a voicemail. When she called back during lunch, I could hear the smile in her voice. "I knew you would, Mommy. I never doubted you. That review changed everything. The phone rang off the hook. We started getting reservations from people driving in from other cities, food tourists, critics, chefs from other restaurants coming to see what the buzz was about. I had to hire more staff, then more. We went from 4 people to 10, then 12. I hired a manager to handle front of house so I could focus on the kitchen. I promoted one of my line cooks, a young guy named Miguel who had raw talent and the hunger to learn. I started developing new dishes for a seasonal menu. The pressure was intense, but it was the good kind, the kind that pushes you forward instead of holding you down. Around this time, I started noticing something. Staff from Maison Bordeaux were coming in. Not the manager, not yet, but servers, bartenders, even one of their sous chefs. They'd come during their off hours, sit at the bar, order quietly. One of them, a server named Danielle, approached me after her meal. "I just want to say," she started, looking slightly embarrassed. "This is incredible, really. We hear about you all the time at work." I smiled. "That's kind of you." She hesitated. "It's made things tense over there." I didn't ask her to elaborate. I didn't need to. If you've ever been in a competitive industry, you know that success breeds resentment, especially when it's unexpected, especially when it comes from someone people underestimated. I'm sure there were conversations happening at Maison Bordeaux, meetings where they tried to figure out why their numbers were slipping while mine were climbing. I didn't gloat, I didn't have time, but I won't lie and say it didn't feel like justice. Quiet, steady justice. One evening in late October, I was in the kitchen during the dinner rush when a server came back, looking nervous. Chef, there's someone asking to speak with you." "Can it wait?" I asked, plating a dish. She bit her lip. "He says he's from Maison Bordeaux." I stopped, looked up. "Who?" She checked her notepad. "A guy named Philip. He's the manager." The kitchen went quiet. Everyone knew the story. They knew about the interview, the rejection, the reason races existed in the first place. My hands were steady as I wiped them on my apron. "Tell him I'll be out in 5 minutes. Finish this order," I told Miguel. He nodded, eyes wide. I took off my apron, washed my hands, and checked my reflection in the stainless steel. Hair a little wild, face flushed from the heat, but chin up. I walked out into the dining room. Philip was standing near the host stand, looking uncomfortable and out of place. When he saw me, he attempted a smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Hello," he said. I didn't return the smile. "What can I do for you?" He glanced around, taking in the full dining room, the energy, the obvious success. I wanted to. He paused. "Congratulate you. This place is impressive. Thank you." We stood there. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, "Look, I know things didn't go well with the interview. I appreciate you stopping by," I said, my voice even. "But we're in the middle of dinner service. I should get back." He nodded quickly. "Of course. I wanted to say I may have been too hasty, too focused on a certain image instead of actual talent." I looked at him, waiting. He shifted his weight. "If you're ever looking for a partnership or investment, I'd be interested in talking." And there it was. Not an apology. An opportunity. For him. I smiled then, but it wasn't warm. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not interested." He blinked. "I'm building something here that doesn't need fixing or outside investment. Something that's mine." His face tightened. "I understand. Good luck." "You too," I said, and walked back to the kitchen without looking back. You know what's funny about success? It doesn't erase the past, but it gives you a different lens to see it through. That moment with Philip should have felt triumphant, vindicating, and in some ways it did, but mostly it just felt complete, like closing a chapter I didn't need to reread. If I'm being honest, there were plenty of moments in those first 6 months where I wanted to quit. Nights where I sat in the empty restaurant after close, surrounded by dirty dishes and exhausted staff, wondering if I'd made a massive mistake. Mornings where the alarm went off and my body refused to move. Days where a supplier messed up an order, or a piece of equipment broke, or a customer complained about something out of my control, and I felt the weight of it all pressing down. But then I'd remember. I'd remember sitting across from Philip, being told I wasn't good enough. I'd remember walking through my neighborhood and seeing families who looked like me, who'd been told the same thing their whole lives. I'd remember Sophia's face when she saw the restaurant for the first time, the way she whispered, "You did this, Mommy." And I'd get back up. By December, we'd been open for 4 months and the restaurant had found its rhythm. The staff knew the flow. The kitchen ran like a machine. We'd added a weekend brunch that was so popular we had to start taking reservations for it. I'd hired 2 more cooks and a pastry chef, a young woman named Claudia who made desserts so beautiful people took photos before eating them. We were profitable, not by a lot, but enough that I could finally exhale. The holidays brought their own kind of energy. I created a special menu for Christmas week, traditional dishes with my twist. We served bacalao, tamales de mole, ponche, everything that reminded me of home. The dining room was decorated simply, white lights, fresh flowers, candles on every table. It felt magical. On Christmas Eve, we decided to close early and have a staff dinner. Everyone had worked so hard, sacrificed so much. I wanted to thank them properly. We cooked together, laughing and telling stories. Miguel taught us a drinking game from his hometown. Claudia brought homemade flan. Sophia sat at the head of the table, glowing, chatting with everyone like she was 20 instead of 8. As I looked around that table, at these people who'd become family, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. That night, after everyone left and Sophia was asleep on the couch, I sat in the quiet restaurant and wrote a letter. Not to mail, just to process. I wrote to my younger self, the one who crossed the border with nothing but hope. I told her it would be hard, harder than she could imagine. I told her she'd be rejected, overlooked, underestimated, but I also told her she'd survive it. More than that, she'd build something beautiful from it. I told her about Sophia, about races, about the community that would show up when she needed them most. And I told her that 20 years from now, she'd sit in her own restaurant on Christmas Eve, surrounded by proof that she was always enough. I folded the letter and tucked it into my recipe book, next to my father's handwriting. Whatever you cook, cook it with heart. People will taste the difference. He was right. They did. As the new year approached, people kept asking me the same question. What's next? More locations, franchising, a cookbook? I didn't have answers. Honestly, I was still processing the fact that this first location existed and thrived. But I knew one thing. I wanted to create opportunities for others like me. Young people with talent and hunger, but no formal training or family money. People who'd been told they didn't fit the image. I started a small apprenticeship program, 3 positions for aspiring chefs who wanted to learn. I didn't require culinary school degrees or fancy resumes. I just wanted to see their passion. We got 50 applications in the first week. The interviews were held in the restaurant, and I asked each person the same question. Why do you want to cook? Some gave textbook answers about creativity and artistry, but the ones I chose were different. One guy, 19 years old, said, "Because food is the only language my grandmother and I share anymore. She has dementia, but when I make her mole, she remembers. I hired him on the spot." A young woman said, "Because I'm tired of watching people like us stay invisible. I want to make food so good, they have to see us." She started the next week. The third was older, a single mom who'd worked in kitchens her whole life but never got the chance to move up. "I want my kids to see me become something," she said. "Not just survive, but become." I understood that. So I built a program that taught them everything. Knife skills, flavor profiles, plating, management. I paid them a living wage and gave them space to experiment. Some of their dishes ended up on the menu. Watching them grow, seeing their confidence build, it reminded me why I started this in the first place. It wasn't just about proving something to Philip or Maison Bordeaux. It was about creating a world where people like us didn't have to fight so hard to be seen. In February, something happened that I didn't see coming. A group of investors reached out. They'd been following races since the beginning and wanted to discuss expansion. Normally, I would have dismissed it immediately. But these weren't venture capitalists looking to strip the soul out of what I'd built. They were a collective of minority business owners who invested in community-focused businesses. "We don't want to change what you're doing." The lead investor, a black woman named Lorraine, told me over coffee. "We want to help you do more of it." I was skeptical. I'd built this without outside money, and I liked the control that gave me. But Lorraine was patient. She showed me examples of other businesses they'd supported, explained how they structured deals to protect the founder's vision. She didn't pressure me, just laid out the possibilities. "Think about it," she said. "There's no rush. If we'd met you 2 years ago, we would have rejected you. Not because you weren't talented, but because you didn't fit what we thought we were looking for. Now we know better." That got to me. The idea that someone else could have their Maison Bordeaux moment, their rejection that became fuel, and maybe I could be part of changing that. I didn't commit right away, but I didn't say no either. By spring, 6 months after opening, Races had become a fixture in the neighborhood. More than a restaurant, it was a gathering place. I started hosting community events, cooking classes for kids, fundraisers for local schools, open mic nights where musicians and poets performed. I wanted the space to give back the way the community had given to me. One afternoon, I got a call from a local news station. They wanted to do a feature story, not just about the food, but about the journey, the rejection, the determination, the community that rallied. I hesitated. I've never been comfortable being the center of attention, but I thought about all the young people watching, the ones who needed to see that someone like them could succeed, so I said yes. The interview aired during prime time. They filmed in the restaurant, in the kitchen, in the neighborhood. They talked to customers, staff, even Sophia. The segment ended with me standing in front of Races, the camera pulling back to show the full street. In the background, barely visible, was Maison Bordeaux. The reporter asked one final question. "What would you say to people who doubt you?" I didn't hesitate. I'd say, "Watch me." The segment went viral. Suddenly, I was getting messages from people all over the country, immigrants, people of color, anyone who'd been underestimated. They shared their stories. They said I'd inspired them. It was overwhelming and humbling. One message stood out. It was from a young woman in Texas who'd been rejected from culinary school. She wrote, "I was about to give up. Then I saw your story. Now I'm applying again. And if they reject me again, I'll do what you did. I'll build something they can't ignore." I printed that message and pinned it up in the kitchen. On hard days, I read it. Around this time, I started hearing rumors about Maison Bordeaux. Business wasn't good. Their head chef had left. Reviews were slipping. Several high-profile food bloggers had posted lukewarm takes. The dining room that used to be packed was now half empty most nights. I didn't take joy in it exactly, but I did see the irony. They'd built their brand on exclusivity, on a specific image. And when the world started valuing authenticity over performance, they couldn't adapt. Meanwhile, races kept growing. Not because we were trendy, but because we were real. People wanted to feel something when they ate. They wanted connection, story, heart, and we gave them that every single night. One evening in April, I was working the line when a server came back with a strange look on her face. "Chef, there's a situation." I looked up. "What kind of situation?" She bit her lip. "Philip is here, again." But this time he brought someone with him. Before I could ask who, she added, "I think it's the owner of Maison Bordeaux." My stomach tightened. "Great, give me a minute." I washed my hands, took off my apron, and walked out. Philip stood near the entrance with an older man in an expensive suit, the owner, presumably. They both looked uncomfortable. The owner extended his hand. "I'm Bernard Moreau, owner of Maison Bordeaux." I shook it, cautious. "What can I do for you?" He got straight to the point. "I've been hearing about your success." "Impressive, especially given how quickly you've grown. I wanted to meet you personally." I waited. He cleared his throat. "I'm also here to apologize for how you were treated during your interview. It was unprofessional and, frankly, discriminatory." I looked at Philip, who had the decency to look ashamed. Bernard continued, "I'd like to make amends. We're restructuring our team, and I'd like to offer you the position of executive chef at Maison Bordeaux." The words hung in the air. Part of me, a small petty part, wanted to laugh. They'd rejected me when I had nothing. Now that I'd proven myself, now that I was a threat, suddenly I was good enough. I took a breath. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully, "and the offer, but I'm not interested." Bernard blinked, surprised. "I understand you're committed to your restaurant, but this would be a significant opportunity. Financially and professionally, you're right. It would be an opportunity. For you." He frowned. "I don't follow." "You need what I've built here," I said. "The authenticity, the community, the kind of success you can't buy with fancy decor and expensive wine lists. But I don't need you. I've already created what I wanted, and it's mine." He opened his mouth, closed it. Philip looked at the floor. "Thank you for coming," I said, "but I have a dinner service to run." And I walked back to the kitchen. The staff erupted in applause. Miguel high-fived me. Claudia was grinning so wide I thought her face might split. Even the dishwasher, a quiet older man named Jorge, gave me a nod of respect. That night, we cooked with a kind of joy I'd never felt before. Every dish was a celebration. Every ticket was proof. We'd done it. Not just survived, but thrived. On our terms. As the months continued, life found a new normal. Races became a destination, a place people traveled to experience. We won awards, got written up in national publications. I was invited to cook at food festivals, to collaborate with other chefs. Sophia started middle school and began helping out at the restaurant more. She had my work ethic and her own creative vision. Sometimes I'd watch her plate a dessert or talk to a customer, and I'd see the future, not just mine, hers. One Saturday afternoon, we were closed for a private event, a quinceañera for a girl from the neighborhood. The family couldn't afford a fancy venue, so I offered them the restaurant at cost. Just cover the food. The space is free. Watching that 15-year-old girl dance with her father surrounded by her family in my restaurant, I felt a different kind of success. This wasn't about Michelin stars or the magazine covers. It was about being part of the fabric of a community, about creating spaces where people felt seen. That night, after the party ended and the space was cleaned, Sophia and I sat in the empty dining room. She was sketching ideas for a new dessert. I was going through next week's reservations. She looked up. "Mommy?" "Yeah, baby. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd gotten that job? At Maison Bordeaux?" I considered it, honestly. I'd probably still be there, working under someone else, making their vision come to life instead of my own. She nodded. "So, them rejecting you was actually good." I smiled. "Yeah, it was." We sat in comfortable silence, then she said, "I'm really proud of you. Me too, baby. Me too. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. I know this was a long story, and I've never been great at keeping things short. But I wanted you to understand the whole picture. Not just the success, but the struggle. Not just the victory, but the doubt. Because the truth is, most stories of triumph skip over the messy middle. They show you the before and after, but not the during. And the during is where you actually live. So here's where I am now, 2 years after opening races. The restaurant is thriving. We've expanded the space slightly, added more seating, hired more staff. We have a wait list most nights. I've published a cookbook, a small thing, self-published, but it's out there. I've started teaching workshops for aspiring chefs, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. Lorraine and I eventually partnered on a second location in a different part of the city. Same concept, same values, just a wider reach. Maison Bordeaux closed 8 months ago. The building is still empty. A for lease sign in the window. I walk past it sometimes on my way to work and feel nothing. No satisfaction, no resentment. Just a quiet acknowledgement of how things turned out. Here's what I want you to take away from this. When people reject you, when they tell you you're not good enough, not the right fit, too much or not enough of something, they're giving you information, not about your worth, but about their limitations. They're showing you what they value, and sometimes what they value is shallow, surface, safe. You have 2 choices in that moment. You can internalize their rejection, let it shrink you, make you question everything, or you can use it. Let it fuel you. Let it clarify what you actually want versus what you thought you were supposed to want. I didn't set out to prove Philip wrong, though that was a nice side effect. I set out to create something that felt true, something that honored where I came from while reaching for where I wanted to go. And in doing that, I found more than success. I found purpose, community, peace. So if you're reading this or watching this, or however you're experiencing this story, and you've been rejected, dismissed, or told you don't belong, I want you to hear this. You do. Maybe not in the place that rejected you, and honestly, that's probably for the best. But Somewhere, in some version of the future you're going to build, there's a space waiting. You just have to be brave enough to create it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged before you even had the chance to prove yourself? How did you respond? Did it break you or did it become the thing that pushed you forward? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories matter. They remind me I'm not alone in this. And if you enjoyed this story, if it resonated with you or gave you something to think about, please subscribe to this channel. There are more stories coming, real ones, messy ones, the kind that don't fit into neat little boxes but feel true in your chest. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you're not too much or too little of anything. You're exactly enough. Now go build something beautiful. I'll see you in the next story.